Hi, this is Alan Gleeson for Crossfadr. In this video, I'm going to talk about pink noise and its uses in the studio. To begin, I'll explain a bit of the science behind why it is useful, and then we'll look at some examples. So to actually generate pink noise, you can use a number of methods. If you search on the internet, you'll find many examples where you actually download a sample of pink noise. I've generated actually just an audio file of pink noise here using Audacity. It's very easy to do within that software. And I've also got a Max for Live device from Denpa, which is a noise generator which can generate white or pink noise. You might also have some synthesizers that can produce pink noise, but just be sure that it is actually pure pink noise and not some other variation of it. So I can either play my audio file, or I can use this device here. I'll turn this on. Pink noise differs from white noise. If we just switch over to white noise here, you can hear it's a lot brighter. If I open up my spectrum analyzer here and I play the pink noise, how it differs from white noise is that it's got equal energy distribution across the octaves. So it more closely resembles how we actually interpret frequencies, because the human hearing is a non-linear system and we don't experience all frequencies if they're at the same amplitude at the same loudness. If I switch over to white noise, just turn it down a bit, you can see that the energy is more uniformly distributed across the frequency spectrum. Switch back to pink, and we see that we got a slight roll off as we go to the top. So if you've ever put a spectrum analyzer across a mix or some commercially released music that you're working on, you'll generally notice this curve in that you'll have more energy in the lower end and it will roll off as you get into the higher frequencies. It can be used as a mixing tool, so we're going to get to that later. But before that, often what pink noise is used for is in testing and calibrating equipment. And that's what we're going to first do here. What we're going to do is calibrate our listening environment. So we're going to use it to calibrate our speakers and therefore our monitoring level. To begin with, you choose your source of pink noise. I'm going to go over to our master channel, and I'm going to use a meter here that's measuring LUFS or LUFS. Typically in the past, you might use some sort of meter that measures RMS, and the guide value that you would typically go for is -20. So I've got Insight, which is from Isotope, but if you don't have that, there's a free device available from Ulean, this loudness meter here. So as I said, I'm going to be measuring it in LUFS, which is more or less the same as RMS or average loudness. So when I play my pink noise, what I want to register on my master is -20. So I can just reset this here. Currently it's at -30. So I'll just increase the level on my channel here. And I'll do it slowly because we're measuring integrated here. Sometimes it'll take just a slight amount of time to get the average level. So I'll just go a bit higher. So as I said, we're aiming for around -20. Letting it adjust. Okay, it's gone a bit past it there. I'll just turn it down a tiny bit and I'll just reset my meter. Just bring it down a bit. And a bit more. Because you're calibrating this, it's worth spending a bit of time just getting it exactly right. I brought it down a bit too much there. So that's just at 20 there, and I'll check Insight, and yeah, getting the save level there. So once I've calibrated the level that's coming to my master channel, I'm actually using a utility device here just to bring the overall loudness down, because otherwise it'll be too loud when we're actually listening to it here. But when I'm monitoring here, you can see that I was peaking at -30, and I've got my utility device here bringing it down to -20. So if I didn't have that turned on, I'd be peaking at -10, which, if you're working on a mix, is a good average level to hand over to your master so he has lots of headroom to work with. So once we've got that level set up, now we can actually calibrate our monitors. In order to do this, you need to use an SPL meter to measure loudness. And if you don't have a hardware unit, there's plenty of free apps available for both Android and iOS that you can use to quickly set up your speakers. The level that I would recommend calibrating to is 85 dB SPL. Earlier we mentioned that the hearing system is non-linear and we interpret frequencies at different levels depending on the loudness that we're actually listening to them at. If we listen too loud, we'll get one perspective. If we listen too quietly, we'll get another perspective. So various tests have been produced and 85 dB SPL has been measured to be the kind of happy medium, in that it's a level that produces the flattest frequency response, but it's not completely flat. And if we compare an equal loudness curve, you'll see what I mean. It's kind of the happy medium. So in order to do this, again, we get the SPL meter that we're using either on our iPhone or our Android device and set it to measure on a dBc scale, which is a slightly slower response, so it'll give us a good average. So that when you play back your signal, first of all, I like to set the output level on my sound card or whatever your main monitoring device is. So I don't set this to 0. I maybe set it to maybe -10, so that if I do want to go a bit louder, I have a bit of headroom. So once I have it at -10, then I'll do one speaker at a time. I could pan the pink noise, but every time you pan, you get a boost in level. So I just like to leave it in the center, and I'll just turn off one speaker and do one speaker at a time. So I'll place the SPL meter in my listening position, and I'll slowly turn up my speaker until I get 85 dB SPL. Then I'll turn off that speaker, go to the second speaker, and do the exact same. After which, you'll now have calibrated your DAW and your monitoring system to monitor at 85 dB SPL, and that's a safe level to working at. And once you get used to listening at this level, you become aware if something is above or below that, and you compensate for that in your mix rather than compensating for it in your listening environment. There may be times when you might want to listen quieter or louder, but you can just adjust that on your monitor control or your sound card, and then you can always reset it back to, in my case, -10, and I'll know that's back to my calibrated level again. So once you've done that, then you can actually think about using pink noise as a mixing tool. So there's been a lot of hype on the internet about using pink noise as some magical mixing tool that will help you get the perfect balance. And while I don't actually agree with that, both from the examples that I've seen and actually using it in practice, there is certain situations where it can be useful to use pink noise as a mix referencing tool. So as I mentioned earlier, pink noise has equal energy across the frequency spectrum. So if we were creating a balanced mix, generally we would want it to have equal energy across the frequency spectrum. But of course, there are times where you might want your song to be more bass heavy, or certain elements within your mix, you want to overemphasize them. So this technique does not work for every situation. Now, the general idea, what people do when they're using it, is that they'll solo pink noise, they'll set the level for it. In our case, we might follow the calibration system that we actually used. And then what they will do is that they will individually solo elements in the mix. And they will turn them down and bring them up until they're actually just barely audible above the pink noise. And they'll go through each element doing this. Now, I actually did that in this mix. And while most of the elements were well balanced, you notice that the drums and my percussion are not loud and cutting through in the mix. So it doesn't work in every situation, but like I've mentioned in other videos, I often reference other music when I'm working on a mix, just to kind of freshen my ears or give me a different perspective on elements that I'm working in the mix. And the idea behind using pink noise is that pink noise is a balanced energy signal, so that if you compare that with your actual mix, you might hear sounds that are too prominent or sounds that have actually disappeared when you set the pink noise at a certain level. So generally what I do, rather than doing that calibration technique where you listen to noise and you gradually turn things up or down in comparison to the pink noise, I generally just set it at a particular level. And as I'm turning it up, I'm listening for what's disappearing in the mix and what's cutting through and what's not cutting through, and I'll just make some quick adjustments. The other thing that you can use pink noise for is using it as a source of reference if you've got an EQ that has match EQ functionality. And typically what these EQs are for is that when you're trying to match the tonal characteristics of one sound to an existing sound, say you might have re-recorded a vocal or a guitar or a synth and it has a slightly different timbre, what you can do is you can analyze one sound, get its frequency footprint, and then try and match that to another sound to get them to match each other. If I was listening to my mix here, turn up my overall drums. And in this section here, if I thought, say that this section here, or sound here, is not really cutting through as well as it should. Now if I bring up the noise, kind of disappears a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this sound and I'm going to use a match EQ device on it. So I'm going to use the Ozone 8 equalizer. I could also use, I've got a FabFilter Pro 3 that also has a match EQ function on it. Depending on the software and plugins you have available, you'll probably come across an EQ that works, and there's probably a free version out there as well. So typically with a matching EQ, what you do is you sample a particular input, could be a section on that particular track or another track, then you would save that and use that as a reference to transform the sound that you actually want to work on. So in the Ozone EQ, we actually have pink noise here. So I don't need to capture the target from anywhere. I can actually just use pink noise. So we can see our signal that generally rolls off at the beginning. So I'm using pink noise, and I'll capture some of my source sound. So this is the sound we're actually hearing. When that process is finished, I can turn up my amount here. And you can see how it's transforming the signal. Now, a good feature within this EQ is that I can actually smooth out those, because if I don't have the smoothing turned up, I can get a lot of peaks coming into the signal, which might not be advantageous. And you can see it's really boosting a lot of the high and the low end. So there's a bit of, depending on the amount of bands that you have in your matching EQ, there will be certain bands that you might actually want to turn off. But what I'm actually going to do here is I'll bring back in the noise. And I'm going to go back to the source again, got up my EQ. So you can hear the sound is cutting through more there. So I might get an average setting that I actually like. Then I go back, turn off the noise. And then I might refine some of the settings in my match EQ. So monitoring at quite a safe level here, it's definitely cutting through a lot more and has a lot more definition within the mix. So there are just 3 examples of what you can do with pink noise in the studio. As you're going to probably end up using it as a mixing tool, it's always important to start off and calibrate your mixing environment, your DAW and your monitors. After that, then you can switch over to actually using it as a mixing reference. But in my opinion, it's kind of like a quick and dirty method for getting a rough balance. And if you're using it after you've applied automation EQ, it's probably more beneficial there. But you may need to check your mix at various positions if there's automation changes, level changes, things coming more forward and back within the mix. And then if you have access to a Match EQ plugin, you can also use it there on a more micro level to get an individual sound to cut through more when it's in a noisy environment, whether that be pink noise or just noise in relation to fighting with other elements that are actually in your mix. So this has been Alan Gleeson for Crossfadr. Remember to like and subscribe our videos and turn on that notification bell to keep updated on the latest videos.